Today, I want to see how I can create and manage clusters in multiple regions or multiple providers. Anyways, how I can manage multiple clusters spread across the globe and enable developers to deploy their applications across all those clusters. Staging, for example, could be in US and production could be in United States and Europe or Asia or something like that. Now, there are many ways how I can do that, but today I want to make it as simple as possible. I want both operational and developer tasks to be simple. No fuss, no complications, just something that everybody could do. And to accomplish that, I will use Rancher to create and manage clusters in multiple regions and providers and what's not, and Shipa to simplify the deployment of our applications across all those clusters. I already have Rancher running in one of my clusters, and now I want to see how I can create additional clusters and manage them before I jump into Shipa and see how we can deal with deployments. So here's my Rancher dashboard. I have only one cluster, the one where Rancher is running. I will not use it for anything else. So let me create additional clusters. So where should I do it? Let's say AWS. I will create a couple of clusters in AWS, but the logic applies the same and the process is the same, whether it is in Azure or Google Cloud or Linode or DigitalOcean or on-prem even. So I will go to my AWS account and create some tokens. Here we are, my security credentials, and what should I choose? Let's say access keys. So I'm creating a new access key. I will leave it there for now. So let me go back to Rancher and start creating clusters. So I'm going to use Amazon EKS, and the cluster will be called US or EKS US. And I will leave everything as is. The region can stay US West 2, for example. I will create some credentials and I will call them AWS, and AWS access key is this one, and then I need secret access key, which is this one, and create. Okay, which version of Kubernetes I should use? 1.18 is the latest, at least latest supported by Rancher. I will configure network. There's probably nothing here to do. I will leave it as public. I mean, you shouldn't do that in real life, but for now it should be okay. And that should be it. I think node group name, I will call it main. And I want 3 nodes. 3 nodes is a minimum if you want it highly available, maximum 6 and minimum 3. And create. And now it is creating that cluster. I will create 2 more clusters. EU West 1, for example. Asia Pacific Southeast 2. I think that's Australia, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, now I have all 3 clusters being created. That will probably take a few more minutes, actually probably like 10 more minutes, something like that. So let's fast forward to the end of this. Now that the clusters were created, I will create kubeconfig for one of those clusters and add it to Shipa so that Shipa knows how to communicate with one of those clusters. And inside my terminal, I will create a variable AWS region equals whatever the region is. I almost forgot. The gist with all the commands, both for setup and what I'm doing right now, is available in a gist, and the link to the gist is in the description of this video, so go and check it out. And I will get the name of the cluster and put it in yet another variable, AWS cluster name. And now I can retrieve the config with AWS EKS update kubeconfig, and the region is whatever is in AWS region variable, and the name is AWS cluster name. There we go. We got the first cluster, config of the first of the 3 clusters, and now I can tell Shipa to manage the applications in this cluster. And to do that, I will execute first this script, which will install the few things that are required in that cluster, like certificates, mostly actually certificates, so that we can communicate with it safely, and to create the service account that Shipa can use to establish the communication, to authenticate itself and perform certain actions. Now, while this is being created, let me go to Shipa itself. Okay, so first I will create a framework. So here we are. I will call that framework EKS US, and I will leave most of the default values as they are, just to go with a simple option. This is my plan. I will make it public. You probably shouldn't do that. Unlimited number of applications in that framework. I will not enable registries, no enforcement of network policies. I will skip all those things mostly to simplify what you're seeing. If you want to know more details about frameworks, especially frameworks, please go through the documentation of Shipa and you'll find it out. Now that I have a framework, I will create a cluster. Here we are. Actually, I will not create a cluster. I will add the cluster to Shipa Cloud. So Shipa Cloud knows how to deal with it. EKS US will be the name, frameworks, the one I just created, and then we just go next. And I need the address and token certificate. And that's where the script I executed a few minutes ago comes in handy, because it just gives me all that information. Here we are, this is the address, this is the token, and the certificate. Next, okay, I will leave traffic configuration as is and create the cluster. I will repeat the same process for the other two clusters. It will be more or less the same, so I will probably fast forward to the end of the process. Now we are ready to create applications. I will create one application for each of those three clusters, and later on we are going to see how we can deploy applications to those same clusters. To create applications in Shipa, the command is relatively straightforward. Shipa app create, and then we give it a name. Let's say DevOps Toolkit staging. I want DevOps Toolkit in staging environment, or in this case, maybe it could be a cluster, whole cluster for staging. Why not, right? And we need a framework, and that would be EKS US, for example, right? So we're telling Shipa that we want an application that is tied to a specific framework, and framework knows what is the cluster, where is the cluster, what are the resources it should dedicate, how it should do. It knows basically everything that it needs to know about an application, the cluster where the application should be running. We just need to specify, hey, that's the framework for this application. Similarly, we can create, let's say, production 1 for the sake of argument, and we can say, hey, one of the production clusters is in EU, and the other one will be, let's say, production 2, and that one might be tied to the framework EKS AP, which happens to be using the cluster we have in Asia Pacific. Now let's take a look at those applications. Shipa app list, and we can see that there are 3 applications because that's how many I created. The status of all of them is created. Nothing is yet running. This is just the framework or the base of the application that will be deployed soon, and we have addresses dedicated for each of those applications. Now that the applications were created, we can start deploying our application, or the code of, or actually not the code, image of our application with all the corresponding resources, everything that Kubernetes needs to run a certain type of an application. To deploy an application, we can say Shipa app deploy. An application is, let's say, DevOps Toolkit staging, and the image should be whatever the image of that application is. Shipa can deploy directly from the source code, but in this scenario, I'm imagining that image is already built through some other processes, and I just want to make sure that specific image for specific application is deployed. And the image in this case will be vfar6/DevOps Toolkit series. Now let's say that some time passed, and I would like now that same image to be deployed as part of the application running in production. The command would be almost the same. I would say, hey, the application name is not staging anymore, it's DevOps Toolkit production, let's say 1, and go, promote it to production. Why not? And let's say that we want the same application to be running in the second production cluster. So we just change the name to app DevOps Toolkit production 2 and go, do it. Finally, let me double check that applications are really working. So Shipa app info, And the application is, let's say, DevOps Toolkit Production 1. We get the information. Come on. Here we are. And I can see the address through which I can access it. And let's say that I open it in browser. And here we are. This is the application running in production. We did it. It's as simple as it can get. That's it. That was probably the simplest way I could imagine to create and manage clusters, in this case using Rancher, and to create and deploy applications inside of those clusters. Using something like this, anybody should be capable of deploying applications, new releases of their applications to a Kubernetes cluster. And that person might be an expert in Kubernetes, know very little about Kubernetes, or not even know that there is Kubernetes. The goal was to simplify it so much that anybody, literally anybody, any developer, let's say, should be able to deploy a new release of their application in Kubernetes. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, do all the things that you normally do. Cheers.